Okay, so Leviticus 23 and verse 23. We only got 3 verses for Yom Teruah, for the first fall festival in Leviticus 23. All the other festivals seem to get a lot more explanation, but this is what it says about Yom Teruah. Again, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel, saying, In the 7th month, on the 1st of the month, you shall have a rest, a reminder by blowing of trumpets, a holy convocation. You shall not do any laborious work, but you shall present an offering by fire to the Lord. And that's it. That's all it says in Leviticus 23 about the Feast of Trumpets. It doesn't say much, but then there's a lot in here. We'll get into it. Because in Numbers 29, we get a little bit more, kind of the same thing, but it just expounds on the offerings. So let's read that. Numbers 29, 1 through 6. And I have these passages on the handout, but we might need to jump into the scriptures. 29 and verse 1. Now in the 7th month, on the 1st day of the month, you shall also have a holy convocation. You shall do no laborious work. It'll be to you a day for blowing trumpets. You shall offer a burnt offering as a soothing aroma to the Lord your God, 1 bull, 1 ram, and 7 male lambs, 1 year old without defect. Also their grain offering, fine flour mixed with oil, 3/10 of an ephah for the bull, 2/10 for the ram, and 1/10 for each of the 7 lambs. Offer 1 male goat for a sin offering to make atonement for you, besides the burnt offering of the new moon, and its grain offering, and the continual burnt offering, and its grain offering, and their drink offerings, according to the ordinance, for a soothing aroma, and offering by fire to the Lord. So these are all the instructions that we have about Yom Teruah. So this is what we can conclude. When is this festival? It's on the 7th month, on the 1st day of the month. It's a Rosh Chodesh. It's the beginning of a new moon. God told the people that they're supposed to recognize the new moons on the when it begins. And that's another whole tricky topic too. When is the new moon? What is the new moon? Is it when it goes dark, or is it when we see the first sliver? That's a whole another thing that we can talk about there. But the idea is that this is the beginning of the 7th month. Yes, Caleb?
Sorry, I just think that the placement of the festival, the telling of the festivals in Numbers is really interesting, because you have the people who have rejected going into the land, and they've rejected the covenant. They've rejected the land grant covenant that Moses gives, or that God gives to Moses in Exodus 20. So they rejected, and that's the beginning telling of Numbers, is the rejection, and so they're wandering. And now, by the time you get to 29, well, actually, 28 is where Passover is. So 28 and 29 is the festivals. And 27 is where God tells Moses to take Joshua to prepare him going away. And so it's like all of a sudden the festivals are given again. And I don't know exactly why the festivals are the first thing given.
Well,
I just think it's really interesting. That's the
Well, I think one of the reasons I think is because at this point they've been doing the festivals. They haven't really done. God only gave instructions for them to do the Passover and stuff in the wilderness there, and they're about to go into the land because He's giving them a little bit more details. And He says, "Okay, now you're going to do this in the place where I'm going to put My name." So it's just a little bit more details about what's going to happen, and even the location of where they're going to be at. But I don't know. I want to go back and look at that now.
So they didn't, when they were wandering for 40 years, they didn't eat the festival?
I don't think so. They didn't do the Passover.
They weren't circumcised.
So they couldn't do Passover.
They couldn't do Passover. If they didn't do Passover, then they probably weren't counting. They weren't counting, they weren't going to Shavuot. At that point, you're off.
They did one Passover in the wilderness. That was the second Passover when they left Egypt. And then they didn't do it again until they were into the land.
Right, so if you take that into, probably 3 or 4 others.
I think that was God's plan all along. They weren't supposed to do it in the wilderness, because if they had obeyed, they would have gone right into the land.
Right. But that doesn't mean we can't keep them for tonight.
Well, Well, all that we do, as much as we try, yes, it's a memorial because, yeah, we have to.
I agree with you, but at the same time, we do have to remember that modern day mainstream Christianity does have something right when they say that the sacrifices have been fulfilled in Christ. And that doesn't necessarily mean we won't do them again in my opinion. They're shadows. And so shadows aren't a bad thing. But if they've been fulfilled in Christ, the Spirit of Christ dwells in us. This is why I've argued before that the Passover lamb, we actually have the Passover lamb at our table. Because we have Yeshua with us. Lo, I'm with you always, even to the end of the age. So, I mean, I agree, I understand what the point is, and I agree with the point. But at the same time, we as believers, we need to recognize that we have the sacrificial system in place for us right now. It's happening in the heavenly realm.
It's the real sacrificial
It's the
system.
real sacrificial system, exactly.
It's the one that the earthly one pointed to.
So regardless of the fact that we're not in the land, that we can still
Yeah,
the
there's
festivals in memoriam, but also
temporally we obviously can't do it because we're not in the land. I'm taking the credit.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Technically, we obviously can't do it because we're not in the land and we don't have the temple. But that punishment is to the Jews. Israel is a nation, right? Israel is a nation. If the temple is destroyed, because they reject Christ. And that's prophesied by Daniel. Now, I'm not saying that all Jews have that punishment. I'm saying that unbelieving Israel is punished. They're exiled from their land and they don't have the temple. They aren't able to participate in the sacrificial system.
I think your friend should make sure she's coming in the right place.
We, however, have the benefit of the sacrificial system. Right. We're a small group, so.
you guys remember you have that net or hey, remember
Hi, welcome.
So, yeah.
I was curious.
I think it's kind of it's an enigma to try to even wrap my head around because it's a both and. We don't have the temple, we don't have the sacrificial system, and therefore we can't celebrate the festivals for real. At the same time, we have Christ who fulfilled all of the sacrificial system. And that sacrificial system continues to work in heavenly places. And therefore, as believers with the Spirit of Christ dwelling in us, we do have the ability to celebrate every one of the festivals because he was the Passover lamb, he was the sin offering, he was all of it. He was the Yom Teruah sacrifice. All of those sacrifices are fulfilled in Christ. And if we claim that blood, we have a whole hand as well because we have Yeshua sitting down at the right hand of the Father after his work is done, after he presents his blood, right? In heavenly realm. But then it also says that he ever lives to make intercession for us. So his work isn't finished in that he is continually praying for us. So his work in terms of the sacrificial blood is finished, but his work in terms of praying for us continues on. There's a whole lot of both ends.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I'll stop taking your time.
Yeah. No, you're fine. So, Yom Teruah is also a Rosh Chodesh. It's also a head of the month. Okay? So this festival has multiple, it encompasses multiple things. Okay, so that's the first thing that it encompasses. Now I'm asking, what is it? Okay, it's a Rosh Chodesh. It's the head of the month. It's the beginning of a new month, the 7th month. And that's what I was going to mention, is that just like during the week, we have 6 days, and then we have the weekly Sabbath. Well, with the festivals, we have 6 months. The first month has the spring festivals, and then we go 6 months, and then the fall festivals land in the 7th month. So that's why for some, the tradition is, and this is something that we do with our family, which I kind of dropped the ball on. We started this week though, is just preparing our hearts for the seventh month. And during the month of Elul, it's a time of introspection. It's a Jewish tradition, but it's a time of introspection. It's a time of just getting your heart ready for the upcoming festivals. So it's a Rosh Chodesh. Also, it's a Shabbat. It's a day of rest, Shabbaton. It says here in the seventh month, on top in verse 23. On the first of the month, you shall have a rest. That word is Shabbaton right there. It's a Sabbath. Also, it's a reminder. It's a day that we are reminded of what? We'll talk about that here in a minute. Also, it says it is a holy convocation. Okay, so these are the things that this day is. It's the head of the month. It's a day of rest. It's a reminder, and it's a holy convocation. So now, what do we do on this festival? What did they do on this festival? Well, it says it's a reminder by blowing of trumpets. This is where we get the name Yom Teruah. It just says, and I tried to put these passages in here straight from the New American Standard. So if it's italicized, those words aren't in there. The translators put that in there to help us understand what it's saying. So it literally says a reminder by blowing. The of trumpets is added in there by the translator. So it's a reminder by Teruah. Well, it's actually, the Teruah is a sound. Like, for instance, if you describe a sound and it's an oink, there's only one thing that makes an oink sound. It's a pig, at least in our language, or a bark. Okay, that's a dog, or a meow, that's a cat. So this Teruah is only made by a trumpet, or it also comes from people. Okay.
It's interesting because what is the trumpet supposed to remind us of?
Yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to that here in a minute. So this is where we get the name Yom Teruah. Yom means day. I have it down here. What do we call it? Yom means day. Teruah is a noise from a trumpet, a shofar, or from people. It's translated sometimes as a shout. Okay? So we could call it the day of blowing trumpets. It says that in Numbers 29. This is to be to you a day for blowing trumpets. Most of us know it as the Feast of Trumpets. Even though it's not a feast, it's not listed as a feast, like the Feast of Unleavened Bread. There's what else is labeled as a feast? The Feast of Weeks. So this one isn't a feast, it's a day, but we call it the Feast of Trumpets, and it's okay. I think that title is okay for us to use. It's not going against anything because we do celebrate. So again, it's a day of no working, and also it's a day that they were supposed to present an offering. So now, what are other references to shouting and trumpets, this whole theme? What are other references that we can find in the scriptures? Because, like Caleb said, what are they being reminded of? What is this reminder by blowing of trumpets? We'll get to that here in a minute, but here's another time when a sound of a trumpet is mentioned, Exodus 20 and verse 18. All the people perceive the thunder, and now this is where Moses is about to give them the Torah. All the people come to the mountain. They come and they prepare themselves. They bathe and they wait for 3 days. They're all ready to go, and then Moses comes down, and the glory of the Lord comes down on the mountain, and all the people perceive the thunder and lightning flashes and the sound of the trumpet. It didn't say a sound of a trumpet. There was a trumpet being blown. The sound of the trumpet, it's talking about the trumpet of God. The sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they trembled and stood at a distance. So this is the first time that we hear of this trumpet. And I believe that trumpet in there is, I think it's a shofar. I'd have to go back and look at that. Because sometimes the trumpet, it has its own word, like for a silver trumpet, and other times it's a shofar, which is a ram's horn, which I forgot to bring. I was supposed to bring that today. And now this other passage here, this is from Numbers 10, starting in verse 9. When you go to war in your land, Actually, let me go to Numbers because so again, Israel is in the wilderness. They've received the Torah, and they have just done the Passover. The cloud of God is over the tabernacle, and now they're about to walk through the wilderness. And so before they do, God says, make these silver trumpets and use these silver trumpets to call the people to go out to the east, to the west, to the north, the south, or call them in, to call the leaders for an alarm. There's all these different reasons for them to blow these silver trumpets. And in verse 9 it says, when you go to war in your land against the adversary who attacks you, then you shall sound an alarm with the trumpets, these are the silver trumpets, that you may be remembered before the Lord your God and be saved from your enemies. So this is the same word in the Hebrew, zikaron, that they would be remembered before the Lord. And I think Ben had asked when we covered this passage or something similar to it, and he asked, why does God have to be reminded if he knows everything? It's talking about the covenant that God has with the people. Okay, to love God or to remember the covenant is to be faithful to your end of the covenant. Verse 10. Also in the day of your gladness and in your appointed feasts and on the first days of your month, you shall blow the trumpets over your burnt offerings and over the sacrifices of your peace offerings, and they shall be as a reminder of you before your God. I am the Lord your God. So again, they're supposed to blow the trumpets when they're in battle, but also they're supposed to blow the trumpets, it says, on your appointed feasts and on the first days of your months. So at the beginning of the month on Rosh Chodesh is when they're supposed to blow the shofar or blow the trumpets. You shall blow the trumpets over your burnt offerings. Okay. So this is where we make this connection of this remembrance. But still it's not quite clear what they're being reminded of. Like I said, it's God being reminded to keep his end of the deal, to keep his part of the covenant. And like I said, he doesn't have to be reminded, but it's just covenant language. Here's some more passages about trumpets and shouting. Joshua 6 and verse 20. So the people shouted, so we know what this is, right? This is when they get all the shofars. The priests are supposed to get the shofars, and they march around Jericho 7 times. And then on that last time, they're supposed to blow the shofars and shout, and the walls will come down. It says, so the people shouted, and the priests blew the trumpets. This is the shofar specifically. And when the people heard the sound of the shofar, the people shouted with a great shout, and the wall fell down. Now this great shout, this is the word teruah. This is teruah gadol. This is a great, mighty shout. If you know the names of the traditional blast of the shofar, when they blow the shofar, there's 3 blasts, and they put them in different orders during the liturgy. But the last one is the tekiah gadol. It's the biggest, loudest blast. So this is like what the people are doing. They're shouting. Psalm 47 and verse 1. Oh, clap your hands, all peoples. Shout to God with the voice of joy. It's the same word, teruah, or at least it's in the same root. This is the people are using their voices to make this shout. Psalm 89 and verse 15. How blessed are the people who know the teruah. How blessed are the people who know the sound of the shofar, is what it's saying. Oh Lord, they walk in the light of your countenance. And I think that sound, that passage there, that's for us. We know the sound of the shofar. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. That last sound that we're going to hear before Yeshua comes, we're going to know what that is. Psalm 89 and verse 6. When the trumpets and the sound of the horn, with the trumpets and the sound of the horn, shout joyfully before the King, the Lord. So again, we have trumpets and we have the shofar, blasting them before the King. Now this is another, I underline King here because this is another theme of Yom Teruah that we celebrate. The idea of the King. the king coming back, the king coming to his throne. We see that in Judaism. The Jewish people see that as well. But also as believers, we understand that too, that the king is going to return. We know who that king is. It's Yeshua. Isaiah 27:12 through 23. In that day, the Lord will start his threshing from the flowing stream to the Euphrates, to the brook of Egypt, and you will be gathered up one by one. This is another theme that we see with Yom Teruah, a gathering of the people. You will be gathered up one by one, O sons of Israel. It will come about also in that day that a great trumpet will be blown, and those who were perishing in the land of Assyria and who were scattered in the land of Egypt will come and worship the Lord in the holy mountain at Jerusalem. So the people are going to be gathered. A great trumpet is going to be blown. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Matthew 24 and verse 31. This is Yeshua talking about the end times. This is Yeshua in this chapter. He's talking about what's going to happen at the end, and then he puts this in there. And he will send forth his angels with a great trumpet. And that is in small caps there because it's a reference to another passage in the Old Testament, which is the passage we just read. He will send forth his angels, and with a great trumpet, they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other. So again, it's not explicitly saying that this is Yom Teruah, but the people who have been raised in the Torah, who understood this all their lives, they can make those connections, and I think we can too. For those of us who have been studying the Old Testament and looking at all the types and pictures of Yeshua in the Old Testament, now we can make these connections, and they start to make sense to us. And also, I put down here all these other passages because they kind of talk about the same thing. They kind of talk about the people being brought together by God, and even shofar, shofars are being blasted. And finally, 1 Thessalonians 4:13 through 16. This is Paul writing to the Thessalonians. But we do not want you to be uninformed, brethren, about those who are asleep, so that you will not grieve as do the rest who have no hope. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep in Jesus. For this we say to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord will not precede those who have fallen asleep. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, there's that word shout again, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet of God, with the shofar of God. And the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive and remain will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so we shall always be with the Lord. Therefore, comfort one another with these words. And so now, Paul here is being a little bit more explicit and giving us some more details about this. Again, we have this shout, we have this trumpet, we have people being gathered. These are these themes that are being put together. So now, how can we understand this as believers? Like we just talked about, the spring festivals were fulfilled by Yeshua when he came at his first advent. He came as the Lamb of God who died on our behalf. He was the unleavened bread, or he was the sinless bread. He rose, or he died, rose again. He gave us the Holy Spirit to empower us to go and spread the word, fulfilling all the spring festivals. And now, these last festivals, starting with this one, give us an understanding of what's going to happen when he returns. Okay, this blast is going to happen. This shofar sound is going to be heard around the world. We're going to know what it is. Can you imagine that? It's going to be a blast. What happened when they were at the mountain? They must have been familiar with the sound of the shofar. It's an ancient instrument. A lot of cultures use the shofar. They use the ram's horns. So they were familiar with that sound. But what's that going to be like when that happens here? I mean, when we consider this passage that he's going to return, and remember what the angel told the disciples who were waiting around the tomb, or who were looking up when he ascended, the angel said he's going to return in the same way that he left. I mean, it sounds like a Marvel, movie. What's that going to look like? How's that going to appear to us when we hear that blast?
one time it did well. We were sitting there, and all of a sudden I heard the shofar blast, and I, for real, legitimately thought, I was like, dude, it's happening. It's happening right now.
This is it.
This is it. Here we go. It was Kid Rucker's ringtone. I'm not joking. I seriously thought, this is it.
I love all the Lord of the Rings movies where they are getting ready to go to battle and stuff, and you're like, what was the one, The Hobbit, where the dwarves blew the trumpet,
Yeah.
and it just echoed throughout the valley, and
Yeah.
it's loud.
Yeah.
Heard it everywhere.
We read the passage where he talks about how the trumpets command the armies, right? Command the people. And with the, like we were talking before we got started, if they really had 1.1 million, I mean, even if they had 400,000, but if they had 1.1 million, there's no way anybody's going to be able to yell loud enough for everybody to hear. And so you probably had relay stations so that they would, you've heard the shofar blast, this means this, this means this, this means this. You probably had all sorts of different stuff. The thing that I just took away from what you said was, so the numbers 10:9, 10:10 talks about the trumpet being blown, that God will remember his people in the covenant. Yom Teruah is connected to the wilderness. So in other words, every time we celebrate, all of the festivals in some way are related to like the Exodus and water in the desert. So my thought could be that every year we are given the ability to be the Israel that enters God's covenant correctly. In other words, like we come out through Passover, we have the Exodus, but we know it's deeper. We know that it's actually salvation. We have sanctification at Shavuot, and then there's this time period which represents the wandering. But then the trumpets blast, and it's like God remembers his covenant. And then we have Yom Teruah, and atonement is made. And then we have Sukkot, which is like the temporary dwelling, the temporal dwelling of this earth. So it's almost like every year we're given the ability to be re-seen as the fresh Israel that hasn't been tainted through the idolatry of Baal.
I think we're always given these opportunities to start over. Every day we get a new day. How many times have we woken up in the morning and say, okay, I'm going to start this off on the right foot this day. We get a new week after the Sabbath. Okay, I'm going to start this week off. Okay, now I'm going to get my schedule going. I'm going to start this off on the right foot. And now we have new months. The beginning of each month, we could say, okay, now I'm dedicating my month to God. Now we have these annual festivals that we can say, we can look at the pictures and the types of all these annual festivals and start off new every year. So I think that's right. Every year we have these opportunities. Again, some of these things are tradition. Like I said, as we get our hearts ready for the fall festivals, it's a tradition. It's not going to save me. It's not going to make me any more saved than what I am. But it's a way for me to get through this world that just keeps bringing me down, that keeps bringing me temptations, that keeps distracting me and taking me off of the path. And so that's what I love about the festivals. It's just it recharges me. I got certain songs that I like to play. We have traditional foods that we like to eat. I mean, these things, they all put us they put us in the right state of mind. I mean, that's what Passover, we get used to all the things that we're cooking, the lamb, the smell of the lamb, and the various things. I mean, God incorporates all these things to remind us of the scriptures. Were you going to say something, Stephen?
I was going to say that when Ben and I were first, like, to your point, like you want to adopt some sort of like tradition in your family, in your household that helps kind of bring these feasts to life. And we decided one year that we were just going to eat really well. It's a loud festival. So we're going to eat really loud food with pop, what are the pop rocks? Pop rocks.
Corn nuts, those are loud. Those are loud.
Sounds like we're road trips. Hot rocks and corn nuts.
Yeah, exactly. Everything's like. I don't think you told me that was one year, but
I'm excited. It probably won't be this year, but I'm excited for probably the next year because I'll have this. I've been getting this prayer book specifically for passages that we read on Shabbat. But it turned into this giant project, but it should be published probably by next time. So we'll have all of these different scriptures, and I'm sure everyone will add. You should put this. You should put this. Yeah. Well, that was the very first thought process of it, and then so now it's a 200-page prayer book. It's all scripture. And I'm sure the second edition will be like 250. Andre was already like, oh, you have to do 265 in there. And I was like, at what point are you going to bring Paul?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's just it. It's not writing anything. It's just compiling in a different, for specific time.
Do you have traditional passages you read on Yom Teruah?
The Jewish tradition is to read Psalm 27 every day.
One day? It's just one day?
Oh no, I'm sorry. Of the month of Elul,
Oh.
they read Psalm 27 in preparation. I didn't bring my little Siddur either, but there are some traditional things that are read, and liturgy that's done. Also, the other thing, the other tradition, solely tradition, is the Tashlik service. Yom Teruah, what we'll probably do, since it's going to be Monday night, Monday into Tuesday, we'll probably meet here. I don't see why not. I was thinking about that just the other day. We can talk about this. It's just my idea. We can meet here and just have a meal, talk about it, have a discussion, kind of make a loud noise here. And then Tashlik is, yeah, it's the tradition that you go out into a body of water and you cast stones representing your sins. It's based on the passage from Micah that you cast my sins into the deep. Some people put bread. I've heard some people they do bread. Everyone has different. Again, it's all tradition. At one community that we were a part of, some people took bread, and one lady got upset because all the ducks and geese were going to eat our sins. Yeah, come on. It's just symbolic, It's just symbolic. So, and we'll have that liturgy too, because I know some people think they don't like to do that. They believe that it's pagan, or it has some pagan influence. I don't know. I've never really looked into that because it's all symbolic. We're not. Again, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't like, oh no, I didn't throw a rock in the water. Now I'm not saved, or I've lost my salvation. Whatever. No, it's just symbolic. Again, because this festival, it doesn't give us anything to do other than blow shofars. It's confiscation. Okay, we get together.
It's interesting because it's almost like the Rosh Chodesh.
Yeah.
Rosh Chodesh, it doesn't tell you to do anything. You're not supposed to gather or anything. It just says you're supposed to hear the shofar.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and this one doesn't require you to go up to Jerusalem. It doesn't require you to go to the temple. Sacrifices need to be made, but that's all done by the priests. But you can imagine that people would probably be going up to Jerusalem because 10 days later is Yom Kippur. And even though the people had nothing to do on Yom Kippur, they probably wanted to be there. I think it'd be kind of cool to show up and to see if the atonement of the nation was going to be accepted by God, and see the priest come out and in all of his vestments or whatever. And then after Yom Kippur, 5 days later is Sukkot. How long does it take? My understanding is from Galilee, it took 3 days journey. So, people could walk up and make it to Sukkot in between Yom Kippur and Sukkot. But because these people, they also have their fields to take care of and the harvest and that sort of thing. So they couldn't just spend months in Jerusalem if they lived far away. But anyway, yeah. So Yom Teruah it's not a pilgrimage festival. So were they blowing shofars in their cities throughout Israel? I don't know. If they had a horn, maybe. I don't know. They're familiar with the sound. Yeah. So any thoughts? I know that's just kind of a high level, because we could go into each of these topics, like I was saying, we can go into these topics and talk about a lot of different things, like the sound of the shofar, or the remembrance, or the king aspect, or the gathering aspect. There's several different themes in here, but that's just kind of an overview. And my intention is to, this year, I'll have a teaching for us on Yom Teruah. That's more of a preaching, an exhortation, or something. But this was just kind of a high level. This is what the scriptures say about this festival, and related. Yes, it's a time of convocation. Yep, and I well, what I was saying is, since it's going to be Monday night into Tuesday, since we already have the place Monday night, we could just meet here. But Yom Kippur, we would have to ask them if we could use the place. That'd be a Thursday night or Wednesday night.
I think it's in our contract we have it on.
Okay.
So, I mean, unless they got like a wedding going on.
Mm-hmm.
But the question, the thing is that we can get together and have a service on the date.
Yeah. Yep.
Or we could do what Ben wanted to do, go down and cover the option.
Yeah.
I think that's always fun.
Yeah. We need to see if it's available.
I think on a Tuesday.
Because school started by now.
Yeah, Tuesday school day.
I'm trying to remember if I was doing it there last week, or 2 years ago.
There's a couple of people here and there, but. I just think it's fun to be able to get together and hang out.
Yeah.
Eat some food together and blow the shofar.
And so these are just little fun things I put together some time ago for the kids, or not for the kids. I know adults like these kind of weird things too. Yeah, next week we'll do just an overview of Yom Kippur, and then after that we'll do Sukkot and the 8th day. Barnett? Yeah, and in the Messianic world, the shofar has become, because of Yom Teruah, because of the Feast of Trumpets, it's become a really popular thing. People get their own shofars, which I think are cool. I have one, and they bring it to service, and everyone's blasting during the worship time, especially during exuberant worship. Everyone's blasting, which I don't know. I think it's okay if it's done in a way that it's not going to be bothering people. There was one time, one of the communities we were part of in Colorado, the pastor made a really big deal about it and said, "Everyone buy a shofar. Bring your shofar for Yom Teruah." So a lot of people did. I mean, we had tons of shofars, and people were blasting and blasting and blasting. On Yom Teruah, that was fun, but they kept bringing them every service, and you couldn't hear the worship music, and they were blasting them right in behind someone's ear. And so it got to the point to where he said, "Okay, if you're going to bring a shofar, you have to go up in the balcony." And we had this balcony full of people with all kinds of shofars, and you had to wait for his signal. He'd be in the front, and he'd lift his shofar, and that meant everyone can blow their shofar. It got kind of wild.
If you're blowing it all the time, though, like biblically speaking, they would blow it on Rosh, they blow it when they're going out
exactly, and that's exactly what I think too.
I
Um,
think there's a place for kids to play shofar and stuff like that. But ultimately, what is most edifying to me is when I hear somebody who's doing this out of
yeah,
pride, and it's like, okay, this is what they were doing.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like that, because I don't think of like the dying mule sounds. I think of these heroes coming back.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah. And I've had mine for a long time, and I'm still not. I'll like, I do it every morning during the month of Lul to wake the kids up. But it's a big one, and I've had guys tell me that they can get 5 notes out of the one that I have. I can't. I mean, matter of fact, I'll share this video on the band app. But one year there was one Messianic Jewish congregation who was really Jewish in that they did the second day of Yom Teruah, which is a Jewish tradition. It's the Bible only says one day, but they did the second day. Well, they needed a place to do their festival, so they asked us if they could use our place because we weren't doing it, and so they came. And me and I took my 2 girls down with me. It was early in the morning. Remember that? And they did the whole service. The ceiling was like this, so they couldn't lift up their Torah scroll. They're kind of holding it short. Then they wanted to honor me since it was our place to carry the Torah scrolls. First time I'd ever done that. And carry the Torah scroll around, and they had the shofar. Well, no, they didn't have a shofar. They had to use mine, and I thought mine was messed up because I could never get any good sound out of it. And the guy, his name was Richard Bristol. He picked that thing up, and man, it was amazing. It was at the time. It was like the best shofar sound I'd ever heard. And I'll post that video because if you've never been to a traditional shofar liturgy, they blow it about 100 times with all of the different types of blowing that they do. Um, and the fellow that leads the liturgy, his name was his name slipped me. What was his name? Not Bert Yellen, Bill Berg, Pastor Bill Berg. He was a he was from a conservative Jewish family, a family of cantors. And when he accepted Yeshua, his family rejected him, kicked him out, and so he became a Messianic pastor. But yeah, anyway, huh? Who's that? Oh yeah, my nephew back in Texas. He's amazing. He's amazing. Yeah, yeah. We had a couple.
Anybody who's played trumpet can easily play it. Can shofar.
Yeah, we had a couple guys in our community. One was a trumpet player. One was a trombone player. And the guy that was a trombone player, he came up with a composition with the guy that was a pianist, and they came up with this composition together. And he created, because you have the names of the different shofar blasts. The last one he created was called the Teruah Hamashiach Yeshua or something. So he created his own blast at the end. And I think we still have that video, or someone has that video on YouTube. I stumbled upon it the other day. I'll share that too. But anyway, yeah, it's a blessing to have someone who can blow the shofar really well, because like you said, it has a special significance, and I think it's important for us to display that because that's what we're supposed to do. But even for everyone to have a shofar and blast it on your own.